When the Crusaders breached the walls of Jerusalem in July of 1099, they unleashed a slaughter of horrifying proportions. Thousands of Muslim and Jewish residents were massacred in the streets, a bloodbath that shocked the few survivors who managed to flee. But the shock stopped there. The broader Islamic world essentially ignored the event. No massive retaliation followed, and no grand coalition of Muslim armies marched on the city to take it back. The Middle East was paralyzed by its own internal rivalries. The Sunni Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad and the Shiite Fatimid Caliphate in Egypt were locked in a bitter struggle for supremacy. To the scattered local emirs holding power in the Levant, the arrival of the Crusader states represented just another localized faction to contend with. Local Muslim warlords viewed the European knights not as an existential religious threat, but as convenient mercenaries. They regularly forged alliances with the Crusaders to sabotage their own Muslim rivals. It took a solitary scholar in Damascus named al-Sulami to recognize the true danger. Watching the Franks carve up the Levant, he authored a radical new theological framework. He defined the struggle as a mandate for internal spiritual purification and absolute political unity across the Islamic world. The Crusaders, he proclaimed, were not invincible military geniuses. They were a divine punishment sent to exploit the sin of Islamic fracture. This theory inverted the geopolitical strategy of the era. Driving out the invaders required a ruthless, hostile takeover of the fragmented Muslim states first. A few decades later, a rising warlord named Nur al-Din adopted al-Sulami's academic work as aggressive state policy. This text recounts Nur al-Din's campaigns absorbing neighboring Muslim territories. He frequently relied on methods other than brute force. When targeting the vital city of Damascus, he used back-channel diplomacy, propaganda, and strategic correspondence to win over the local militia from the inside. Nur al-Din commissioned a magnificent wooden pulpit to be placed inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. He ordered this decades before he actually possessed the military power to conquer the city. By linking territorial expansion to the future liberation of Jerusalem, Nur al-Din transformed the conquest of his neighbors into a religious obligation. To fully encircle the Crusader states, Nur al-Din needed to control Egypt. The wealthy Shiite Fatimid Empire possessed the manpower and resources required to fund a massive, sustained war. Saladin systematically dismantled the Fatimid Caliphate from the inside. He ended 2 centuries of Shiite rule and brought Egypt back under Sunni control. When Nur al-Din died in 1174, the fragile coalition immediately collapsed. The empire fractured right back into competing fiefdoms. Historical chronicles reveal Saladin spent 12 years fighting almost exclusively against fellow Muslims. He laid brutal sieges to Islamic centers like Mosul. He defended this violence, arguing the emirs were corrupt, and only absolute command could forge a front strong enough to retake Jerusalem. The man remembered as the ultimate adversary of the Crusaders actually built his reputation on the foundation of a grueling, decade-long civil war against his own people. By 1186, Saladin had finally battered the last of his Muslim rivals into submission. He united the massive territories of Egypt and Syria under a single pro-jihad Sunni banner. For the Franks holding the coast, the spatial reality was terrifying. They were caught in a geopolitical pincer, completely surrounded. Saladin could now mobilize the wealth and manpower of 2 vast regions. The scattered warlords of 1099 were gone, replaced by a centralized war machine. Before a single sword was drawn at the decisive Battle of Hattin, the sheer geopolitical weight of this newly united Islamic front made the collapse of the Crusader states a mathematical certainty. In July 1187, Saladin shattered the Crusader army at the Horns of Hattin. Months later, he marched into Jerusalem, ending a century of Christian occupation. Saladin handled the conquest with deliberate restraint. He allowed Christians to ransom themselves and leave safely, sparing the city's inhabitants from a retaliatory massacre. This act of clemency secured his dual legacy. In the East, he was immortalized as the righteous unifier of Islam. In the West, tales of his chivalry made him an enduring figure of respect. The Crusades didn't naturally inspire an Islamic alliance. Left to their own devices, the fragmented emirs of the Middle East would have continued their endless feuds. Instead, brilliant and ruthless visionaries weaponized the threat of the West to forcefully glue the Islamic world back together, creating a unified power structure out of a fractured landscape.